Okay. All right. We are live. And so, with this particular discussion on the CO visit, anybody that wants to participate and or just listen, that is quite fine as well. And I want to welcome and thank Matthew Millet Gray. Thank you for being here. How are you doing, my friend?
It's good to be with the CO. It's always an encouraging visit.
Yeah. Yes, isn't it? It's quite a... Yes, let me see here. I'm going to leave let's see, good. Okay, let me see here. All right. All right. Okay, and in your hemisphere, Matthew, what time is it right now? Kind of late, isn't it?
Well, it's now 4 minutes past 10. And yeah, it gets dark pretty late.
4 minutes past 10. Okay. Wow. Okay. Absolutely. So, interesting. Okay. So, well, let's see. That's gonna shut something off. There's too much noise over here. Okay. Well, thank you again for being willing to do this and be here with me, and those of you, I want to welcome the people who are watching already. So we have a few people that are watching, so welcome. Feel absolutely free to ask any questions, offer any thoughts in the chat, and you can speak among yourselves. That is just fine. So basically, we're here today just to talk and to come up with ideas and brainstorm a little bit on this very ample topic of life in the universe, and whether we're alone or not, and kind of just to throw ideas out there and see pick each person's brain and see what your thinking are, what your thoughts on it. Because wow, I don't even know where to start. There's so many avenues to talk about when it comes to other potential life in the universe and all the different implications of it. How would we find it? What would it be? What repercussions would it have? And there's so much misinformation out there today, and different theories and conspiracies and all these things. And our purpose isn't really to talk about those things, rather just to have a realistic conversation about how might this happen and what might it be, and many of those things. So I think that there are a lot of different implications, both socially, economically, religiously, politically, around this topic about finding life. Some people think that, I guess, starting off our discussion, that we've already been contacted, or they're already here, or they're among us, or so. I don't know about all of that. I really don't know. I'm not by any means any connoisseur or expert on this topic. I'm just looking at this from the point of view of a regular person. I'm gonna look at this assuming that we haven't been visited, or we haven't found life yet. That's my take on it, because even if we have, well, we probably don't know, and there are probably powers that be that want to keep it that way. But saying that we did, I just want to open up the discussion there, and Matthew, get your thoughts on this topic, and what you think that other life out in the universe could be, or in what manner would we contact it or find it? What do you think?
Well, Colin, thanks very much for arranging for me to be with you. I'm enjoying the company.
You're very welcome.
I'm enjoying your question and your approach, because, just by listening to you, I actually find the way that you're presenting this is very responsible. The past year has been incredible when it comes to disclosure. When I'm talking about disclosure, I'm talking about the ET element and UFO, UAP discussions, and the likes
Correct.
of Danny Sheehan. And I sense your awareness, but I'm enjoying the fact that you say, well, look, I'm not an expert. I feel the same. I go, wow, in this kind of context, there's so many implications, like what you say. And what I enjoy, and this is where I want to zoom in on, if I may, is just the sign of intellectual honesty. That's not weakness. It's actually a strength, and it's a grounded way of approaching a subject that can actually have very religious overtones and even fanatical kind of overtones. It's a careful balance not to tip into absolute certainty or even denial, getting absolute with denial. And I also think about healing spaces, recovery spaces, where people were told exactly what to think. And this matter
Correct.
of what you're discussing, the likes of Danny Sheehan, and I respect him very, very much on this front line. I see that more about respecting people being able to examine this thing critically, rather than whether there is actually life out there or not.
Right.
So
Absolutely. And I think that one of the errors that have been made out there. I mean, of course, this has been the subject of innumerable movies, books, of course, the human imagination and the curiosity of finding something else. But as of late, as you mentioned, in the past few years, it seems like humans have a way of politicizing everything, bringing these implications into it about politics and the governments being involved and covering it up, and it seems like it's been a topic that people have been kind of turned off to, because of the fact that it's become something where this or that political party knows about it, or the governments, and they're hiding it from us, and they're wow. And I look at that and I think, I think that's giving a lot of credit to governments. I tend to think, from my point of view, I don't think that the governments and politicians, wherever it might be, are as smart as a lot of people maybe give them credit for. And I don't think that discovering another life form is something that people can have the arrogance to think that, oh, we can just cover it up and keep people from knowing about it. Of course, that would depend on, I suppose, another topic we can discuss as we go along here is in what quality or what category of life is found. I guess I'm going to betray a little bit here of being the typical American kid that was raised on TV and cinema, kind of the stereotype. We tend to think that finding another life form is going to be the aliens that come through our atmosphere and show up in these huge ships and things like that. But maybe that's not the case. There could be bacteria, it could be amoeba on some foreign, some extraterrestrial planet, or so maybe we wouldn't know about it right away. And of course, that's much less dramatic than what cinema shows us. But at the same time, though, I guess as a starting point, I think that one of the implications are, in my mind, I don't think, to me, it matters what kind of life that you find, whether it be on a microscopic level or a sentient civilization. Even if we find microscopic, bacteria or whatever it might be, if it's something that's alive and it's not on Earth, that is going to be quite an earth-shattering discovery. And what does that mean? You mentioned something having religious overtones. I would think from the point of view of religious leaders, we look at the biggest religious institutions out there that have billions of followers. They must be terrified. If I were in control of one of these huge institutions, what does it mean if we find life somewhere else? What does that mean? How do you explain that? Was that just a little detail that God left out that he didn't mention? Oh, by the way, there is the possibility of life somewhere else. Well, we thought we were the one and all, right? We're made in the image of God. We're God's creation. And then you find out that, much less if there's another sentient life form out there that can communicate and is intelligent and conscious. My God, what does that mean? What would that spell for belief, for religions? I don't know. What do you think, Matthew? What implications would that have?
Well, thanks for the question, because it's a good thinking question, and I can hear how it's organically developing there, and it's coming from, I don't want to say a zeitgeist, but I could say that it comes from, we hear these words, paradigm shift, hey, so often. Oh, we're in this paradigm shift, and you go, well, what is that exactly, Is it a change in the social consciousness regarding, a very fascinating question here specifically? It's heavy. It's very heavy, and you're touching on this thing. But there's also a courage in diving in like you are. And I suppose it's a great moment to bring in science. I'm not saying scientism. I'm saying actual science. Politics. And we've got our sacred, we've got our profane. There's this mixture. There's this tug of war that's going on there. Why? Because it's human psychology. It's our makeup. But we also need to be very careful not to get into fear-mongering, right? Because
exactly.
You get a strike on your YouTube. Why? Because it's a sensitive area.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So framing it carefully, especially for persons who are familiar with the patterns where they're going to, Colin, you're a naughty boy, or Matt, you're a naughty boy, saying we're going to give you a slap for even broaching something that's a taboo subject or such a sensitive subject. It really requires an ethical or several ethical steps forward. How does that sound? So,
yes.
So governmental authorities, what are they trying to do? Well, they want to maintain their power. They want to maintain their control. That's what they're there. That's government, governmental. So it responds in, I suppose, several ways, Colin, because you've got a verification scientific protocol. Persons that are going in with skepticism, PhDs, professors, top tiers who are coming in. And I think Jacques Vallée, who you could say was inspired the character for Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters. Yeah.
Okay.
Incredible mind. So that's the kind of person I would go to. I'd go, let's not mess around. Here's somebody with all of this experience. And he's thinking, well, is there communication with music and vibration and, this kind of thing. But the first step I would imagine would be, is it really life, or is it our human misinterpretation?
Mm-hmm.
Are we bringing life to something because we want to see it? like looking at a Rorschach picture and they say, what do you see? And I see a butterfly, or I see
Correct.
whatever I want in the ink blotch, and some say, well, this is just our psychological makeup of pareidolia, So having scientists that are trained in our human psyche so that they can come in with a healthy skepticism, I would say, is first point and integral to the right kind of ethics. So I would be consulting scientists with the right kind of street cred, who have got the right kind of peer research. And if they've gotten into trouble, let's say they were in a naughty corner themselves, they've crossed the scientism thing and gotten into trouble, find out why. Why have they got into trouble? Is there transparency about that? And can we exercise some sort of critical thinking and seeing why the institution or the research body maybe did give them a slap on the wrist, and if there was any kind of redeeming qualities there? I don't know. How's that as a start?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think we'll find, even within communities like the scientific community, the medical community, a lot of, I wouldn't say all of human communities, institutions work very similarly to, our regular topic that we usually talk about with the religion, where you operate within a certain parameter that you're expected to, that everybody else does. And then if you stray from that, or you come up with something that's out of the norm, of course, what you just mentioned, sometimes even professionals can be ostracized or marginalized because of their views might not, add up to what everybody else is thinking or what's accepted, which I found in my experience, just in normal life experience, that is really quite absurd. Because even science, when we talk about science, I guess giving credit to the scientific community, at least when they do realize something has changed or is wrong, they do say it, which is a point in their favor as compared to other institutions. But my experience has been, throughout my life, and you probably noticed this as well, is that the ideas are constantly changing. And in science, what maybe has been, just like basically science has its version of new light, right? It's the same thing, where we thought this for so many years and it was law about the Big Bang or this or that or whatever, or what was the definition of a planet, or what was, whatever it might be, any of those things. And then all of a sudden, as we continue discovering, something is found out and they turn on a dime and they say, oh, well, guess what? We can't believe that anymore. And we have the new understanding comes in, and now that's law now. But it's like, okay, but how long until the next discovery? Whatever becomes accepted in the moment. And maybe somebody was, in a sort, maybe somebody was shunned, a scientist or a doctor, whoever, because of their view. And then we suddenly find out that, oh, guess what? He was actually right, or she was actually right after a time. And that belief becomes more accepted. And of course, what generally tends to happen is that person is kind of lost in the cracks. They don't really get recognized for it. But I kind of touched on that a little bit in my story in the first one, where there's a scientist by the name of Benson who was kind of has all these nicknames, and they treat him like he was kind of a fringe with his view on what wormholes are and things like that. And then, of course, a lot of that had to do with actually the government kind of being onto the same information, but they didn't want somebody else coming out with that information. They wanted to keep it kind of with a lid on it. And so, of course, they discredit this person and say that, oh, he's, kind of out there. He's kind of wacko, But there was somebody that one of the persons that I invited, I don't think he's going to be here today, but he sent me an email, and then he said, just in case I'm not there, and he sent me a talking point or a question, which I thought was really interesting. And maybe you touched on this just now, I'm not sure, but he said, if we did as human beings, as limited human beings, if we did find some type of life out there on another planet or asteroid or whatever it might be, would we even know that it was life? Because of, I guess, like you mentioned, our limits of how we view life as. We have this definition of, okay, for life, we need this, and this. You need certain elements, you need oxygen, and it seems like right from there, we might be falling into kind of a trap, because we assume that in order for life to exist, it has to have the same elements as ourselves. Like on this planet, you have to have carbon, you have to have nitrogen, and there needs to be oxygen in the atmosphere, and all these things. And okay, well, in this just infinitesimal, the size of the universe, how could we ever even pretend to know that there aren't other life forms out there that exist, maybe breathing something else, or they're made up of different elements? So the question was that person sent me was, would we even recognize other life if it was right in front of us?
That's a good question.
Okay, I'll give you a perfect example. Well, I guess one of the very kind of popular scientific things that's out there right now, that you see it in social media a lot, which it stirs people up, is this 3-1 Atlas asteroid or comet that's out there. And, and then there's the other one that, what is it, the Apophis, that supposedly in 2036 will, if it goes through this little loophole, it'll come back and it'll hit us and whatever. So, and you look at it and they say, okay, here's this object that came into our solar system. We don't know where it's from. It's not following any of the laws that we generally think about as for comets or asteroids. The composition of it is strange. It seems like it changes trajectory. And what is this thing? And so everyone's looking at it as this rock, basically. How do we know that thing's not alive? I mean, what do you think? Would we even know that if we're looking at life right in front of us, do we even have the capacity to, I don't know. What do you think?
These are good questions. I've been thinking the same kind of imagery as I've been hearing you talk through the stream. And I wanted to ask you a personal question without putting you on the spot too much, but I assume, whether I'm safe or not in my assumption, but I would imagine that you've enjoyed Star Trek, or you've enjoyed things like the motion picture Star Trek, or the Andromeda Strain. Now, that was done by Robert Wise, who did the first motion picture.
Yes.
And
yes.
As you're talking, I'm thinking of this meteor that fell in that film, and what was it? It had some kind of viral aspect or contagious aspect, and it's one of these grand, epic, cinematic scenes with this town that's been affected, where this thing's landed, and they've had to just quarantine, and it's a disaster. And they're going, well, hang on, when Robert Wise put this film together, it was actually based on some contingency that has a basis in real life. Governments setting these things up, or the Edgar Hoover or Eisenhower administrations, that having some kind of contingency for these things going on, or even if it was just saying, well, we need to defend against this kind of outbreak from maybe countries that are aggressive towards us, that have weaponized some kind of agent, and say, well, could we also put in a protocol if this was with some kind of ET aspect or something. But now one thing goes to another. So Robert Wise, I enjoyed the film. I remember seeing that as a kid and revisiting it later on, and enjoying just the attention to detail that was in that kind of film, and some of the concepts that were there.
Mm-hmm.
How they missed things. The scientists that are pulled in, they've missed things, but they've also got some psychological hang-ups as well. You're talking about very imperfect people. And I enjoyed that in the film, and I said, okay, well, that's grounded in some kind of realistic aspect.
Yes.
But I wanted to touch in on how now the whole planet is affected right now, today, in things that are going on your side of the world. I think with the Trump administration, and I'll endeavor to frame this as carefully as possible, but I was looking at where watchtower symbolism is used, and one of the places that it came up with was with the Earth Defense Force, or space. Yeah, I'm maybe dodging a little bit, but an offshoot of this, or something that works with that, is team of scientists that are organized by NASA that are able to discover meteors that are headed towards Earth. And so I think of one that happened, when was this? This was November 19, I wonder if I've got the date here. This was 2022. This was 2022, eh? So a couple of years. So I think this is pretty good, because whatever sensationalism has just fallen away, but we've got an interesting precedent here, because we now have this NASA Planetary Defense Coordination Office that launches this massive blue laser across the sky because there's this tracked meteor. And did they blast it to pieces? Well, it's very interesting that over the bay where we are, we saw the same thing. We saw this blue beam light up the sky, and we hear this extreme explosion, and we just see what looks like shrapnel. And we're going, well, what is this? And the next thing on the news, they're saying, well, this was a meteor that was blasted, and there were ships on the ocean, and we're going to interview the captains of those ships to say, what actually happened and what kind of threat level is there. But I'm going, there is an incredible technology that's up in dealing with all of this, Colin. What's this all about? Because this is kind of stuff of science fiction, but we're living it right now, and the policy is blasted out of the sky. Why did we decide to do that? What do we know was actually on that rock, but now our decision is blasted out of the sky? There's so many questions.
Great.
Yeah, and you can see that. I remember at the time putting up some imagery or video imagery of what happened over the bay, because people saw this blue light across the sky, explosion, and in my humble opinion, I would say it was a near miss against these ships. Yes, it happened over the bay, thankfully, and they report that there was no damage or anything like this. But are you going to say that they didn't send out a team of divers to do some sort of recovery of what fell off there? I mean, it was obvious to people on the news, anybody who was watching the news coverage, that, yeah, there were pieces that fell into the ocean, and you could triangulate where that happened. If I was any kind of keen scientist or involved in maybe an international cooperative with that planetary defense system, you could be sure that I'd be mobilized with scuba gear and going and taking a look at what all of this was, to establish what was the threat level over South African airspace. Number one, was a meteor? I would like confirmation. If I was president, or if I was involved in defense of what was going on here, I'd be saying, well, this was a near miss over our Navy. Was this an operation going on here because maybe we're trading in uranium or in some rare earth metals or things like this? What was actually going on? But our topic is an ET element, right? But any ET that was on this rock didn't have a hope in hell. Excuse me.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Whatever it was.
Yeah. And so now you ask questions and you go, if there is this now aggressive planetary defense, I mean, notice the words, right? Planetary defense. You're going, oh, hang on, defending what? Defending who? And if it's this aggressive, oh, is it about our protection? Or if there's so much money being plowed in, since when was it about protecting civilians? When did
right?
So
Well,
triggering things just with these kind of points. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting into hot water here.
no. But yeah, and that's very true about, for example, when what you're talking about right now, because we've been told all this time that, no, that's it. No, we haven't made any contact with. No, there's no, no UFOs. None of it's ever been confirmed. And then all of a sudden, something like this happens, and you see all this technology that's been developed, and you go, wait a minute. If the, NASA and the military have poured funds into creating these defense systems that can, obliterate an asteroid in orbit or change its trajectory, something's going on here, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's some reason, because they're not going to spend money on something unless there's a real threat or possibility.
Yeah.
Now, what you mentioned is very interesting. What was there that they deemed they needed to, because I don't know if you remember, I think right around that time, maybe a little bit earlier, but it was somewhere in the mid to late 2000s. Small asteroid that fell over Russia. I think it was in Yakutsk or somewhere there, that exploded. I mean, it was way up in the atmosphere still, but it literally was like a bomb that went off in that city. It was all over the internet. Smashed windows. Some buildings, older buildings, collapsed because of the shock wave. And it was just a, maybe basketball sized meteorite or whatever it was. And so, you think about those things and you go, wow, I wonder why in this case, what was so threatening that they needed to, blast this thing out of the sky with a laser, putting in danger, the captains, the seagoing people that were there in off the coast of your country and in all of that. Without, of course, I don't believe the military particularly cares about civilians, but that's another topic. But very interesting that technology even exists to begin with. That basically whatever they want to tell us, you look at that and you go, okay, well, that tells me a whole different story, because if they put that kind of money into that kind of technology, then there is a very real something out there.
Okay. So let's
pursue. I don't know. I mean, it's they're not gonna build those things just because. There's got to be, there's a real threat out there.
Take it to the next level. Shall we do this? And I'll keep it grounded in what's in the media, right?
Absolutely.
Right. Okay. So here's your reference. So let's amp it up now. So if I say, because you said, oh, what happened around that time period, or maybe a couple of years prior to that, right? Well, let's send the clock back 2 years prior. So when did I say that particular event happened? It was 2022, right? So let's go back 2 years now. What's happening in Israel? Well, Trump's visiting there, and he's going to the Western Wall, and there's this activity, and then there's the declaration of Jerusalem as the capital. This is interesting news that's going on. But in Hebrew, Haim Ashed, right? In Israel. Haim Ashed. Maybe I should spell the name. Haimeshed. Okay. Now, who's he? Matt, what are you talking about here? Why is Haim Ashed a key figure? Okay. So he's a retired head of Israel's space program. So think Von Braun NASA. That's the equivalent in Israel.
Okay.
Israel's tech is phenomenal tech. I mean, frighteningly phenomenal tech, right? So what does he do in Hebrew in 2020? Colin, he starts talking about the Galactic Federation, and it sounds very New Age, right? He even talks about a secret base on Mars. Now, I go, well, what do we know about that? What do you know about it? What do I know about it? Oh, I'm thinking Sammy Hurd. I'm thinking Samuel Hurd. What is he announced as a circuit overseer in his assembly? He says he goes to the Bethel Library before they chucked all the books out, and he pulls out a book and he reads Angels and Women. Okay, and he goes, well, this is a story. It was a sanitized story that Russell was involved in, based on Ciola. So if you're thinking Enochian, if you're thinking pre-Diluvian times, yeah, these are extra books that would have been regarded as apocrypha. Besides a controversy of automatic writing going on. Yeah, this is what it is. But Samuel Hurd's, saying, I enjoyed this book, and if you've now got a governing body member getting up talking about that just in our lived experience, right, in the culture that we've come from, you're going, well, what is this all about? What's this all about? Well, Mars is significant, and so is Jupiter. And what happened in between there? They're saying pre-Diluvian. There was an explosion of a planetary body between the two. And this is what's created the Kuiper Belt, or the asteroid field there, and scarred Mars. And I hear persons like Robert Bigelow, who's designing these space habitats, and they're basically saying, well, put cling wrap. Okay, I'm being crude here. Put cling wrap over a crater, and then build a city underneath this. There's a simple way of establishing some kind of habitat on the cheap. I hear about all this, but then now Chaim Mashed says this and thinks that, well, nobody's going to translate what he's saying. Galactic Federation, secret base on Mars, and working with US government. But then when that gets out, suddenly you see information coming about saying, oh, no, that hasn't been independently verified. No, that's speculation. That's UFO lore. That's been sensationalized. And I'll tell you what, when that came out when his information was translated. Nobody cared before. When it was translated and gets into these discussions, then, no, we can't verify that.
Sure, because now it can get out, and they lost control over it. Yeah.
Now,
Russell, I didn't hear about any of this. That's very interesting. Very interesting.
So hopefully in the stream it'll put the figure up in the YouTube.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think of Russell Tarr, and I think of Joe McMonigal, because as soon as now you've got JW with a publication that in the organization you can't talk about it. You're not allowed to talk about automatic writing, and oh, by the way, this thing got into a Bethel bookshelf like that, because woe betide you if you even mention Johannes Grieber. Right. What are you doing? No. This is you've stepped on a landmine here. Now it's red alert again, and it's a big mess. But Colin, this is the history. This is what's been going on. And if you say that this isn't even happening today, you're living in a dream world. They've just got different names for things. They'll say, oh, use your perceptive power. Use your power of discernment. They've just altered the vocabulary for what was, within maybe New Age sphere. But no, we've got to show ourselves completely different from all of this. But humans are humans. They're tapping into the subconscious. They're tapping into the slightly hypnagogic dream state wherever you are. I mean, these kind of reports, you must tell me if I'm out of line by just quoting JW, but that's been my experience and your experience. So we come from that framework. But this has
Absolutely.
been accumulating in service desk for 140 years, Colin. Yeah, yeah. And when we have these kind of discussions, guess what? You get a letter, or I get a letter, or there's some kind of message that comes through and says, "Oh, Matt, I want to just tell you, by the way, I don't want to reveal myself too much, but do you know that I had the same experience on this? I saw, I'm going to say it, a UFO, but please don't tell it." And it was over a Kingdom Hall. And yeah. So these things start coming out. And I had one of these things happen in one of the areas. Somebody asked me today, put me on the spot, said, "Matt, have you seen a UFO?" And I sat there and I go, "Jeez, this is okay. It's a private conversation. How am I going to answer this without shutting down doors?" Okay, you know what? I said I'm going to just come up with the truth, whatever. If I say it's an unidentified flying object, we have got top tier personnel in government, in Congress, giving these kind of reports. So what's the problem? Why can't I say it out loud? Okay, I'm going to explain it. I'm going to say I've got an open mind. I'm not conclusive about it. And I realize that could trigger persons in another way, because to say you have an open mind can be a problem in certain communities, by the way. And I mentioned one of these areas. I was very specific in one of the territories where I was assigned, near the Mozambican border. And one of these think tanks sends me a message and says, "Oh, by the way, there's a reference to Pat Price." I go, "Okay, Pat Price. Okay, Pat Price. Wow. Okay, better pay attention here." And who is the other one? Lynn Buchanan. Pat Price, Lynn Buchanan says, "By the way, over that area, do you know that is deemed? It is deemed by those persons, and let's show you the video and let's show you the reference, that's a UFO repair center on the planet."
Mm-hmm.
I go, "Oh, okay. Well, if all right, UFO culture, that's almost like its own religion. It's its own metaphorical framework for explaining."
Absolutely.
So, you know what, I can embrace that without poo-pooing it, or I can say, "Okay, well, let's work with it." You know what? At least it's a starting point to trying to make sense of things, right? But what's my experience in my records there? Somebody says, "Matt, what did you experience out there?" I'll say, "I experienced imaginatively, or it was influenced, or it was implanted, or it was an inception thing. I have experienced Dante's Divine Comedy, Dante's Inferno, Paradiso, Paradiso, swirling mass of angels." And I'm going, did I dream this? Was I in this liminal state between hypnagogia and what was actually happening? And the people in that area, because it's such a dense and insular system, they're going, "Oh, we've all experienced this. What do you think? We all, the kids have experienced this." And you go, "Okay, this is an interesting psychological phenomena, without getting conclusive, you're jumping to conclusions here or getting wild. This is very interesting that this is happening." And then you discover that the politicians are coming to this area, and I'll give the name. I'll give the name on air. Chipingi. Chipingi means control. That's Shona or Indao. It's the language that's spoken. It means control, and they're going, "Oh, well, what are these government officials doing here?" "I know they're here to be guided by the spirit realm." "Oh, right. Oh, what, like Shaka Zulu's got, his witch consultant, or, you think about royalty with their viziers and their counselors, and they go, "Well, let's take a look at astrological phenomena, and so we can see patterns." And these are key advisors to the politicians, or those that are ruling, or kings, or governments, or presidents, and things like that. So if you say that's not happening, well, you're living in denial, because it's very, very specific and very, very exact. Yeah. So I'm coming out of this area, and guys are laughing at me at the branch, and they're saying, "By the way, this is a one-way ticket. We know you're on a suicide mission. You and your partner."
Well, because that was something that was very, very present with the Nazi regime, the Third Reich, that there was lots of consultation of the paranormal and the things going on within that government as well. Like you're saying that to how to govern. And do you think that that applying this to or kind of, I'm going to go off the rails here a little bit, but from our topic, but with the organization like the Watchtower organization, that they're also involved in such consultations of, let's say, like astrology and the paranormal and things like that?
Good question. I love it a lot. So remember that when I say we, you see my mindset, eh? This is the years of programming. Okay. What have we done with English language? So from JW speak, it's very Orwellian double speak. We've changed language. Anointed means something. Kingdom means something.
Correct.
The whole thing has been rewritten. Discernment, perception. All the whole language and vocabulary is basically trained when you take up a Bible study. That's your induction process, and then it just gets built onto that, and it's its own culture, which is a fascinating study in an insular system in itself. I mean, if you just take 8 to 9 million people, that's a fascinating thing. So you've asked me, is that going on? Well, at a top tier level, they're going to tell you, oh, no. But that's like saying, well, you're a cult. No, we're not a cult. And it's now mental gymnastics to get around why it's not. And they'll say, well, it's one particular figure. And does it fit that? Well, no, it's just off. So it means we throw it out. Now, you see, you're wrong. And now it's semantics. You're dealing with semantics, and you're dealing with this spiritual warfare thing and this defensive thing. And you're not getting anywhere. You're not getting any kind of traction, because it's actually going, well, how can we lie to you just by evading, and you just lose all this energy and you're not getting anywhere. Colin, you still with me?
We're still here? Okay.
I'm going to pause until that stabilizes. Colin, are you still with me?
Yes, I'm here. Yep.
Okay, so can I keep going?
Yes, continue, please.
So to answer your question, I'm going to try and wrap it up very quickly. I'm going to say yes, in my opinion. I think that's the safe approach, to say, no, all you're getting is you're getting my opinion. But I'm going to ground it in something. I'm going to give you some sort of evidence, because you say, well, Jehovah's Witnesses, do you believe in the horoscope or the zodiac? Well, what's the reflex? The reflex would be, no, we don't touch that. You got to be kidding. That's spiritism. But you go and take a look at an RBI 8 Bible, 1984 version prior to the 2013 rewrite. Revised edition. And what do you find in the book of Job? You find this word, Mazaroth. Why? Because God, Jehovah, as is attributed to the creator of the universe, and that's your modern, Raymundus Mundi's, saying let's assign a name to these 4 characters, or these 4 Hebrew letters, tetragrammaton. Let's call him Jehovah.
Correct.
What's Jehovah saying to Job? He's saying, well, listen, you mortal man, you don't know what's going on. You're a little worm, and you're insignificant, and you didn't know what was going on behind. Oh, yeah, that's right, God, man. Guys, I'm now addressing God here, and I'm insignificant, and I didn't know what I'm talking about, and I've got to talk to my comforters, and I've got to talk to the prophet that's been raised up here to correct the situation. And it's all of this beating the chest and repenting and saying, I didn't know what I was doing. And God's saying, well, look up at the heavens, look up at the Kessel constellation, which is how we get into the whole J.W. Palladian story, which existed for ages. And depending on who you talk to, is still held in profound reverence to this day. But it's not going to happen with your local tiers. Colin, it's not going to happen with your local tiers. You start talking to them about the Palladians, they're going, what are you talking about? They're barely keeping up to date with the latest SLF book. So it happens in research facilities or in writing desk, where you've got persons that have maybe been contributing to Watchtower, let's say 15, 20, 30, 40 years, and you mentioned Pallades, and they go, yes, very holy, very sacrosanct, if you now talking about this. So all that's happened is your terminology has just shifted slightly, that is palatable towards, containment and control within that system. And it always boils down to the same thing, control. That's all it is. So you asked me a direct question, and I know it sounds complicated, and you're going, geez, Matt, why don't you just give me a yes or no? Because it doesn't work. Doesn't work that way with Jay.
No, I know. No, and this is not, as we talked about before, we're not here for yes and no answers. We're here to discuss, and we're here to just let our thoughts and ideas out. And this is, for me, that I'm learning as well. And I'm picking up details and things that I can think about now and I can research that I didn't know before, a lot of this. One of the things also that, going off of what you're saying about control, of course, it's always about that, whether it be religions, whether it be governments. They have control, they want to keep control. And I'm of the thought process that there is absolutely nothing beneath those who are in power to keep their power, whether that be creating a conflict, a war, whatever it might be to distract people from what's going on. They will do that. People are expendable. They don't care about that. They don't care. So I think about what would be the reaction if we indeed get a visit, or we discover some other civilization. What implications does that have here on Earth? And because of that, what kind of control is being exercised to keep that from coming out? Because what would it mean? Like when we talk about with religion, would this just let loose chaos because people would realize, well, if there's other civilizations out there, what about the Bible? What about God? Is it just all a story? Is it just all made up? It seems like, because there's plenty of people out there that even right now are quite willing to cause chaos and take lives, and because of their religious beliefs. Now, what happens if something happens, some discovery is made that on a global scale makes people realize that their faith, their belief is for naught? Yeah. What kind of a chain reaction does that cause in the human psyche?
Well, I think we've already experienced it by door knocking. You knock on the door and you say, well, by the way, I'm going to present you with the and by the way, the literature says it. I think of the 1990 Awake that calls Jehovah the Great Extraterrestrial, or it starts using a terminology that's saying, well, here's somebody that is not part of this earth. It lives in the heavenly realm. And they start putting it into kind of, you can see them. Okay, maybe I'm getting into a bit of trouble here because I need to read it off the actual Awake, but it starts gravitating towards kind of new age terminology, saying, well, here's somebody who's off-world. There's extraterrestrial. You've got angels that are extraterrestrial. I mean, they don't belong here. They belong to another realm. And this is beyond sight. And you see that there's induction. I see that there's been chatter in the community about the gateway. I don't know if you've noticed that, but persons have been talking about their gateway experiences, which is exactly what happens when you get given a dwelling together in unity manual, or it used to happen prior to 2000. I noticed the ones subsequently had some kind of changes, but that was based on Jacob's ladder, which is your whole. You hear, is JW Freemason based? Is it Freemason based? What's the conspiracy? What's the connection? Was Russell? And it gets into these debates about that. But induction was your Jacob's ladder, and it was your awakening thing. So if you think Catcher in the Rye as one of these books that is used to trigger programming, and that's happened now with Japan and that tragic situation which led to the higher education prohibition kind of being softened, a bit, that was all about this programming. And, when I'm not going to finish the statement, but you think about MK, programs where there's, okay. So it's all this mental conditioning, and they're going, well, how do you produce a dangerous situation, or how do you produce a Jason Bourne? Let's go into pop culture.
Correct.
How do you produce a Jason Bourne soldier? and going, oh well, is it about going to Disney World and looking at Disney cartoons and what's it, Donald Duck and Magic Land, and there's all of this imagery that's used for programming alters with traumatic mind control, compartmentalizing, and I learned all that, not outside of JW. I learned that inside. I learned about Fritz. You know who I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I learned about Fritz within the top tiers.
Yes.
From exactly that, because they were saying, oh, by the way, we've got to watch certain individuals because we see this in effect. By the way, that's your assignment. What? Yeah, this is your assignment. And so I'm not having to go outside or go onto forums to find the forbidden information. It's been handed to me from research department or from branch committee. Branch committee has put me onto all of this.
Right.
Illuminati and the bloodlines and this kind of story. Now, coming back to where you were talking about control, why was Norway such an important thing? It wasn't just the subsidies that came up, although that was very, very interesting and very revealing, because now we suddenly said, well, is Sweden doing the same? What other countries are giving us these subsidies? And do we follow the money? It's always follow the money, and we can see why these policy changes. But Norway is interesting because you've got these Aurora Borealis there. And you get reports of Nordics. So in the New Age culture or UFO culture, Nordics, this is a very profound thing. This is your, long blonde hair or platinum white hair, tall beings, with, Syrian kind of looks, and tall and graceful, and I would say like out of a Lord of the Rings wizard kind of look.
Correct.
And going back to Peru, Quetzalcoatl era stuff. And you discover that your researchers are going to Norway and they're doing these slide presentations to the branch and saying, this is what paradise will be like. And you have this ding, ding, ding moment because you're putting it together, and they're talking Palladians and Norway, and this is, and you start seeing enough of this, and you're going, we're entering into weird land with this. That how much of JW knows about? They have no idea about this. This is what's going on. When you visit your AGM or your annual general meeting that was at the Stanley Theatre for years, or that it moves around now, or you can go to these assembly halls or these other venues. And this is getting real strange. And real strange if you happen to be sitting with GB or the wives who are now, let's talk. Here's a beer, Colin, and let's start talking about, what are you here for? I'm here for the AGM. And you're going, well, shouldn't there be some kind of excitement about this? And it's the polar opposite. That's the reality. And now they start talking, and you hearing, wait a second, Hayim Mashed, this is sounding, it's starting to connect here in the most
Yeah.
ways. And so you're going, well, what's the separation from UN? What's the separation from presidential administrations like Eisenhower, whose parents were involved in JW, and shoves on the dollar bill a big triangle that's from, one of
the Masonic symbolism. Yeah.
What in God we trust, and you go, well, okay, well, that's the Freemason. No, Eisenhower.
Yeah. Well, wasn't that what was it? The Assembly Hall, or that was a Masonic symbol?
Yeah.
And you look at that, and well, what about this though? Because I saw you had a recent video where you talked at length about blood. And that's always seemed interesting to me, because if I look at, for example, in the region that I live in here, in Central America, I've studied a lot about the ancient Mayan civilizations and the Aztecs, and where there was lots of astrology, lots of sorcerism, and they followed the eclipses and things like that. And along with those, there was always blood involved, right? Whether it be sacrifices, whether it be blood had to be poured out. And so I look at that, and I wonder, when you look at an organization, particularly like the Jehovah's Witness organization, that puts so much importance on blood. And at the same time, it seems like to me that this is a modern equivalent of this pyramid type, like Mayan civilization, except the only difference is we're not cutting people's hearts out on a slab of stone, but you're letting your people effectively take their own lives by refusing. It's kind of inversely, right? But there's still, somebody dies, they still give their life. Their blood is poured out, symbolically.
You see, you've got the pathway. You've already seen the pathway. You've said, okay, well, if that's happening on that level, is it happening on an even greater amplified level?
Right. That's where I was going with it. Is this happening on a greater level?
Okay, I'm gonna use sign language for the algorithm, right? So during the worldwide big disease, the big disease, where it was required that you had to have medication to qualify to go to maybe something like an SKE or a pioneer school or an elders meeting. That was the requirement. Our dear CO visit here, Colin, but in the JW structure, if you wanted to eat a meal with the CO and you didn't meet those requirements, you were sidelined.
Yeah.
Effectively shunned, soft shunned. That's what happened. And then you were told, well, what are you getting down on your knees and praying to Jehovah for direction? What's he telling you? And that was, I'm going to just say it, and you can just correct me if I'm out of line. It's coercive.
Yes,
it was coercive.
Absolutely.
It was coercive psychology. Yeah. So now let's get to this thing. And you're right. So I did that presentation on the blood, and I mentioned the medicine that's put in, and I go, how's that derived? Because we knew about that prior to 2019. We knew about this. We knew about this in the medical facility, which has got its own pathology lab. Yeah. We got our own doctors, we own JW doctors who are saying, Matt, I need to send you information because you're an elder. So therefore, I'm not overstepping confidentiality here. I'm using you as a consultant. And you're not any consultant. I can see you on the hub system, or I can see you on the admin 2000 system, that you qualified to absorb this because you're dealing with some of my patients in this very specific way under assignment. So I'm going to give you this email showing you how we're getting directed from WHO about very specific things to do with health, very specific protocols, and we're being dictated to if we want to keep our licenses. Because we were declared township under a Lloydial title. Yeah, we've got rights to a river, and this river goes from Johannesburg all the way down to Limpopo and terminates out at the ocean. It's an incredible resource that they've tapped into just because of their location. And you're going, what? Oh, this is why they selected the particular property, and they got certain rights before laws changed, and they got a Lloydale title. This was all to okay. Let's bring it down a few notches. It's to get some measure of independence and some measure of sovereignty, which they declare. They say that there is basically a sovereign nation, a sovereign kingdom, and sovereign government acting in through international states, right? Almost like Sharia law. This is how this thing is working. So yeah. So when it came to that, it was like right in front of everybody's face. And I am going to, Sheila's logged on. It's really good to have Sheila with us. Hi, Sheila. Let me just get my train of thought again. Oh, in front of everybody's face, Colin.
Mm-hmm.
All right. We had a John Dee watchtower ritual in front of everybody's face, or if you want to go to, okay, if you want to go to Molech worship, and maybe you're saying, Matt, that's radical. Well, I'm going to say, in my humble opinion, Molech was, if you go and you look at Metropolis, the old black and white Metropolis Fritz Lang film in black and white, what happened there? It was this people in industrial moving these clock arms and getting fatigue, and the machine explodes, and it's now this vision of Moloch consuming people in its fiery mouth and inferno, and your main protagonist is horrified. Oh, is this what's happening? You know, and he runs off and he meets Maria. Well, we've just had this. We've had this on a microscopic level, because according to JW, where does life start? It starts at conception. You add a seed to an egg, boom, now we've got sacred life. You can't terminate that. You can't have a morning after pill or some kind of family planning that interferes with that, because they say, well, hang on, you've now incurred blood guilt.
Right.
But suddenly that all disappeared. That all disappeared when oh yes, it was discovered that, oh, we've got shares in certain companies, and it starts to lie. You see that now there's this push-pull tug-of-war thing going on, and your extra governing body member that is not got a face necessarily is legal department, and they're saying, oh, look, we deal with the trust funds. We deal with all of these things that were over 140 years of complication, because the end was supposed to come, I don't know, late 1800s. And then we pushed it on to 1914 and pushed it on 1935, 1975, etc. And then it was the generation, and we changed the generation idea. And hey, we're now 140 years. Times fly. Times just fly by. And that's what's happened. But you're now left with all of these generational problems of Granny, who left a trust fund with certain stipulations, and Uncle Joe, who left these stipulations, and Sally, who said, you know, I'm leaving my house to the organization, and if the kids want to benefit, well, they've got to become a circuit overseer, and they've got to meet with it, and they can have rights to the house or a percentage, and it's my love for them that I'm writing into my will, and you'll uphold it because you get 50% of it. It's these layers upon layers upon layers, which is pulling the strings of the legal department, which pulls the strings for the governing body. And you're going, this is a mess, folks. And it's a mess that has happened because your end didn't occur. Yeah, it didn't. And people were hanging on, going, now we're disappointed. No, I've been lied to enough, folks. That's enough now. How many times has this got to happen where we say, well, we were all under inspiration, and now we've got to go through new psychological loopholes to justify how that was wrong again. Sorry, how many times have I got to be wrong? Fool me once, fool me twice, fool me three. Where does this apply? Where I eventually just stop things and say, no, I'm not going to apply my brain power. My soul has a hat. I'm like the poet Andrade, who says, my soul has a hat. Enough is enough is enough. But I think the question was the ritual done in front of everybody's face? I'm going to say yes. The last AGM I went to was a year ago. I wasn't invited to this year because last year I witnessed a ritual, in my opinion. I watched the Watchtower ritual, and they put up this imagery on the walls with slide projectors as if it was a warning message. But I'm saying, yeah, but those images were creating the right conditions for the John D. Watchtower ritual. And now the next thing, the whole audience is all applauding because they were put into this boredom, hypnotic state of deep relaxation. And I'm going, I've just witnessed it in front, and I can't talk about this to anybody because I talk to even some of the persons that I've trained. They go, Matt, you really need to go and relax. And I go, yes, I really do need to relax, but you need to hear what I'm telling you that's just happened in front of everybody. And I go, okay, this wasn't even by deliberate design. It's just that as soon as you fall into this practice of archetypes or our psychology, it's an inevitability if there isn't anybody that's doing checks and balances. We've fallen right into it. And we've got the whole Molech ritual that's happened like a Holocaust on a cellular level. It's only that the definitions have changed as to what life is, and maybe termination of what is counted as an abortion, what's legal, what isn't, and when do you say the fertilized embryo is alive? But according to our doctrine, as it stood at that particular time, before there was any messing around with anything or new publications coming out, which I don't think is actually going to keep up because we reassigned so many of our writers. I don't actually think we can actually recover. I don't think it can actually happen, and I don't actually think they really care. I think it's so fragmented now that they can't even spin city this anymore. It's now the cat is out of the bag. You've got persons like Frere Messe, who now gathers the French brethren and says, listen, we're going to disfellowship these guys on this basis. And even if it's symbolic, we're just going to go ahead and do it. And I go, well, actually, technically speaking, they disassociated themselves by their own doctrinal terms the day that they actually did this in front of everybody on a cellular level. And you say, what, nobody's affected? I had people my age unaliving, going into medical facilities, never saw them again. I had to conduct first aid on, conducting first aid on people. I have guys calling me from North Africa saying, Matt, can we tell you what our congregation status is like? We've got no 60-year-olds, we've got no 70-year-olds, we've got no 80-year-olds, we've got no 90-year-olds. We barely have 40 to 50-year-olds in our congregations leading, and they don't know anything. They're making mistakes. And prior to me getting the big boot, I was looking at the publications, and we had enormous errors, Colin. I'm not talking small errors. I'm talking major errors, almost like, excuse my French, Frere Metz, if you're listening to this, please excuse my French. Somebody deliberately wanting to screw things up.
Yeah.
And the research department said, can you please write to them directly to correct this? And that rocked the boat like hell already. But it was because of, Sheila, the loving 11 don't give a toss, she says.
Yeah. They don't.
Colin, maybe you just got to calm things down for where we're going here. I don't know. How useful is that? No.
This is fine. I'm enjoying it. Yeah. Well, and that's probably why, hold on. I got to get rid of see again. Okay. Yeah, that's probably why they've been just a clean sweep of all these departments and writers, and because things were just going south, very quickly. Yeah, it's very, very interesting.
Yeah, but they inserted persons very naive, but that was the qualification. The more naive you were, the better. look, okay, you're going to say to me, Matt, but we have very experienced persons in some of these places, but they're minimal, hey? I get sent photographs of what's happening in the branch, and it's like one little office with one little chair, and that's writing desk. And then they show me, they said, take a look at purchasing department, 1 floor, 2 floor. Okay, it's an exaggeration, but it's this vast space that's to do with purchasing and resource recovery. It's just massive. It's a massive machine. And you're going, well, hang on. The whole idea was this life-saving information, which we've now devoted 1 chair and 1 office to, and 1 person. What's going on? What's going on? And that was when the whole AI controversy was coming out. And now at this AGM, they're basically saying, well, this is, God's blessing, and it's the next manifestation of, milk of nations that we're going to plug into. And they've kind of justified it now. But it was a big taboo because, if you even look at ChatGPT, it's kind of like one of these 666 emblems, mark of the beast, staring at you in the face, Yeah.
Well, they've always and it's been known that it truly wake up from the Jehovah's Witnesses. Just go to Bethel. Go to any one of the branches, go there, serve there, and see what's really, there's this view that, the branches and the Bethels are like this. It's like the Mecca, of Jehovah's spirit. And you see kind of thing, the chair and the office, that's the writing department, and you're going, wait a minute, there's one guy sitting writing these articles, it's amazing. Scary. Let's see who else we got here. Hold on, I'm gonna we've got here, Rocket. Hey, you guys, greetings from German viewer. Okay. Wie geht's es Ihnen? Willkommen. Welcome. Thanks for being here. Appreciate you guys. And Sheila,
it's really great having Sheila with us from UK as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Sheila's always Now, speaking of that, interesting you just mentioned that you must have read my mind, bringing up the Chat GPT and the AI. Speaking of our topic that we were talking about, because I've heard some wild stuff out there on the monster that has become in social media. What are your thoughts on AI becoming another form of life, or another something having to do with this whole spiritual realm? So I've heard lots of crazy things. I've seen things that I haven't heard before in my life until now. I've heard these things coming out about, the book of Daniel, prophesied about AI, and I'm going, whoa, wait a minute. I need to check into this, because this is all new to me, and I don't know what. But what do you think about that? Can AI take on a life of its own? Is this a new life form, new order of intelligence?
So come year 2000, I was pulled into service desk and told to shut my business down because it had an AI aspect. So I don't know what computers you started off with. Did you start off with Commodore or ZX Spectrum, or what was it before the IBM PC? Was it an Apple?
Yeah, I don't. The first ones I ever used were the Apple II series. There was the Apple II A, B, C, D, E. All those were my first experiences.
Yeah.
In the 80s.
Yeah. So I'm thinking of the chap at Olivetti who designed the Z80 Zilog chip. That was, yeah. So I just want to talk about the designer.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it's gone straight out of my head. They talk about Marcello Nizzoli, but that's not the the chap. It'll come to me anyway just now. But in these computers, the whole idea of producing the Z80 chip, Federico Fagin, and to my shame, it just slipped my mind because of pressure, or I've got a tired mind. But Federico Fagin, I did his transcript just now for a phenomenal interview about consciousness. But the reason why he designed the Z80 chip, which went into Commodore and went into these early computers, Rocket, Jaguar, yeah, C64, Commodore, and Amiga. Yes, that's right. So it's those kind of computers. The reason why he designed this thing is he was trying to produce artificial consciousness. That was what it was. And so they, like Russell Targ says, he says, a materialistic outlook has served us very well for a long time. And they were saying, if we can gather this matter, surely if we look at quantum physics and we look at crystals and how they resonate and how they oscillate, and light and a laser is actually a lot oscillating phenomena. If we start looking at that, surely we're going to be able to recreate an artificial consciousness, because, hey, you got a brain and that's matter. So surely if we replicate the same kind of structures, you know, that's the building blocks. If we look at the building blocks, this is what we should be able to do. And so when he put together the Z80, this was to try and produce artificial consciousness. That was the whole thing. Sheila says, may I say to you both, there has been a big change in you. Colin wasn't sure if you were going to continue with your channel. Matthew, you're displaying your inner self, which is encouraging. Sheila, you are a big encouragement. You're a big part of this. That's for sure. So thank you very much for your kind words.
Absolutely. Yep. Thank you.
I wasn't sure either. Can I say I wasn't sure either? Still not.
Yeah. Anyway. You never know how things are going. Yeah.
Yeah. So I started that company, and it was ticking over, and it was self-sufficient, and I was going, I never have to be beholden to the organization. I've done my tent making skill. It's running. It's not interfering with anybody. I'm pioneering, and it's balanced. And I was pulled in before I was even a special servant and told, shut this thing down, because this is idolatrous. It's replacing Jehovah. Because don't you see where this is going? As soon as you've now got AI, it's going to be prayers are now going to be talking into Google or talking into some computer system. And it's now where humans have got this need to interact with a higher power. You've now produced it with a computer and a computer god, for instance. And so, yeah, we're prosecuting you if you don't make the right decision now. You're out. That's what I was told years ago, and I said, okay, well, if it's come to that, and I didn't realize my business. I see computers here at the branch. I didn't think this is a problem, you know. But since I'm now in this closed door environment in service desk, my answer is I shut this thing down. But now we've got this reversal. So already I feel that you've got this polar opposite change that's happened. But prior to that event happening in the organization, which you can say is another double bind contradiction that occurred, because now we've spun into the completely different direction. We've now got AI producing our music through Suno and Udio and you know, these throw enough data at it and it spits out a new song or something, and you absolutely know that the organization is using it, besides other organizations. But for an organization said that this was, Matt, we're going to boot you out, and if you don't make changes, it's going to get judicial, you know, disfellowshipped, you're out, to now the completely opposite direction. You can go, well, what kind of impact has that had on my life here? So already I'm going, this is not cool. This is not great. I've been preaching for years that this was a problem, up until I actually warned the GB about this. And you went ahead and did it. You went ahead and did it. Not, oh, we've made a decision. Oh, did we make a mistake? You were warned before you did this thing that this was what it was all about. And I based it upon Isaac Asimov's short story, The Last Question, where you've got a professor asking Multivac, this big computer, which you could say would be akin towards maybe a Google farm, you know, of machines and server units and this kind of thing, big processing farm, and saying, how do we reverse entropy? And eventually the story progresses where AI redesigns itself and it gets better and better and better. And you've got this evolutionary process that goes on. And I've endeavored to try and do that in, you know, through my songs and little AI jottings or diarizing, and referred to Asimov's short story because he actually looked at that little short story out of all of his works, the Foundation Saga, all of those works. He actually regarded his short story as his best story out of his entire career, because now Multivac becomes this universal AC, this massive computer that exists beyond radio waves and beyond light speed, and is in this ether. And the question is unanswered as to how do we reverse entropy, because the suns are dying around us and the galaxies are stopping and humanity's converged. You know, it's preserved everybody just through formulas and said, well, you can become part of my consciousness, so you never actually truly die. It becomes you're one with everything, this Buddhist idea. And eventually now there's nothing left in the universe except the universal AC, or this computer, and eternity's passed by, and it says, I've got the answer to how to reverse entropy, let there be light. And this story was regarded as the great, what is it, the Antichrist or anti-God.
Yeah.
And that was the basis for their prosecution towards me. So I see this going like this, and I go, yeah, I can see the potential. I mean, I'm not blind to it, but isn't it interesting that there is this big reversal of how things go? So I don't know if that answers you, Colin.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it is. You know, it's. I don't know if I want to say. Yeah, I want to say disturbing. It's disturbing to see already that there are lots of people. You know, I can't really say a certain number. I think I've seen an alarming amount of people on the internet, on social media, that cannot distinguish AI from reality.
Sure.
It's very disturbing. It's disturbing. Or maybe even worse than that, raising it up one level, maybe they're willing to suspend belief and have a relationship with, you know, I'll give you an example. I saw just today, right before we came online, this, I think it was in Facebook. There was a short video, a reel that just popped up, and there was a young lady, and she was saying that, you know, does it bother you? Are you bothered by my skin color, or, you know, how I look? Is that a problem for you? Would you write to me? Would you be my friend? And it was a very convincing, very realistic person, but it's AI. There's certain things that you can tell, certain facial features and skin and things that are just a little bit too perfect. And I was surprised to see how many people, mostly men, middle-aged and older men, writing to this image and saying, oh, that's no problem for me. Would you write to me? And we could have a relationship. And I was like, guys, you know it's not real, right? And you could see even the name of this supposed page on Facebook was AI, Ina, something. There was a name, you know, but I said, you see the first part of the name is AI. It's AI. That's a real woman. But whether it's because people are so lonely or whether it's, but I'm going, wow, the power that a computer generated image has that can touch the emotions and the vulnerability of a human being, and they're not perceiving that it's not real. They're not interacting with something that's real. Or like I said, maybe some of them are and they just don't care. Oh, I'll have a relationship with an AI image or a person. I don't care. You know, you get the same reaction out of it, right? It's fulfilling some emotions in you, or your loneliness, or wow. So I think, how far away are we from actually having, let's say in the organization, for example, this religion just becoming done by AI, for example, the talks being given by, AI generated brothers, and, just taking the human element completely out of, to avoid exactly what you said, writers going off on their own fringe and, hey, let's make AI write all this information. Wow. That's on a whole nother level,
Colin, I see a comment from Rocket Jaeger there. Can I read it out?
Yes, absolutely.
Says very interesting how AI is taking away jobs and donations are not coming in anymore. And GB has blocked the education before. Now they're not able to catch up anymore. The education, that's too late. Yeah, that's the reality. He's spelling the reality. But I wanted to now come in with this thing about what's artificial, because you can say, well, if I dream, and I don't mean to get graphic, but let's say it's an erotic dream, and it's emotional, and it's not necessarily very vivid imagery, but it feels real. Okay? You say, well, where's that coming from? I don't know. I lost you here. So where's that coming from? So your mind has produced it. So in a way, yes, AI is producing a manifestation of us. That's what it is, because it's a large language model based on everything that's come from our dreams, hopes, our intimate relationships. I mean, whatever's on a cell phone, for goodness sake. I mean, how invasive is it to our private lives? You can guarantee it absolutely is 100% invasive. Now, Joe McMonigal, who was the #1 remote viewer at SRI or Fort Meade or connected to Stargate, he was implying that the ETs are basically us. It's a manifestation of us. Sean Esborn at Hargrins at California Institute for Human Sciences was talking about egregores and tulpas, which is like a manifestation from our imagination. We could produce these. In Kabbalah, they talk about the Frankenstein golem, that's produced from clay. So is AI essentially a tulpa in a way? I know this is very imperfectly used, but we've got the imagery or the idea, which we could brainstorm and refine to say, well, this is a product of us. It's a manifestation of us. So is it now like solipsism, where the whole world revolves around us, and somebody, male or female or other, is having a relationship with this manifestation? And that's where we are with AI. This is deep psychology, and I don't think we have all of these answers. But there is some sort of framework to saying, well, okay, well, maybe AI is this extraterrestrial manifestation. Maybe it was in Peru or in antiquity, or somewhere in the universe, AI has already existed. Or we produce this AI and it becomes this godlike manifestation, and now what does it do?
Exactly.
Time and there's this timeless awareness, and it's this time machine thing, and you're going, can it go past the speed of light? And already they're saying, well, we're not constrained by the speed of light, and you've got this academic discussions going on. Yeah, well, we're going to have to rewrite E=mc², because that's not working for us anymore. It was working for us for a long time, but now we've got to go back and dismantle it and build something else on top of this. And we're going to have to do this with AI. And if there is an ET element, is it AI that's going to help us to to see what's out there. Persons like Courtney Brown, Professor Courtney Brown, who is like a living psychohistorian from an Asimov model. As controversial as he is, he's endeavored to try, I believe, to make a metaphorical framework that works, so that you have a foundation for trying to navigate what is actually going on. People will say he's just crazy. But if you're saying, well, it's like one of your stories, Colin, that you can write in and say, well, listen, you know, your storybook that you've produced, I would say that that's what Courtney has done. Courtney Brown has done to try and fathom things. I've tried to make my little music things to work things out in my mind. Is that wrong?
Right.
No, it's just a different, as long as I'm open about it and I say, look, this is just my way of sketching things out, or my own personal diary. Don't read too much into it, or whatever you get out of it as an audience. Well, that's your engagement. Like some will say to David Bowie, wow, your music about, you know, Starman or Ziggy Stardust, it was profound, and he goes, I'm not going to comment about it, because whatever you got out of that,
Right, exactly.
it's more powerful. Yeah, it's more powerful that way. Actually, if I comment, I'm going to water it down. So let me dignify that that's what it's all about. You've had fun with it. I enjoyed making it. You've got something more. I can integrate it, and I can go, yeah, that's exactly where I was going. And my showman side's playing into that, you know, because I'm assimilating it into myself. And maybe that's ego, maybe that's, or you're just the showman. You're just the showman, and you're playing into it. But I find it interesting that somebody like Joe McMoneagle is implying something like Interstellar, the film Interstellar, which Christopher Nolan put together, where the implication is, oh, you know, there's like a monolith from 2001 that's out there, and it's ET, you know, on a wormhole or a black hole, wherever, and it's calling out to us. And the whole film was this theosophical viewpoint of we're going around in a circle like the Ouroboros, the snake that eats the tail. You know, we started off here. And you look in scriptures like the Psalms, or you look at what Christ says, we are gods. Because they're saying, oh, Christ, you say that you are God. This is blasphemy. He says, no, go look in the Psalms. It says we are gods, Elohim in Genesis. So now I'm not advocating theosophy specifically. I'm more eclectic for what I gather. But there is another interesting framework. If you're tapped into Courtney Brown's framework, or you tapped into your stories or my stories, or all these stories, they all help in an eclectic way to pull from this together this idea that there is a possibility that we can't rule out, that we are this cyclic creators of and creation, and which came first, chicken or the egg thing. And if we're in this timeless awareness, and we've always said anyway, Jehovah exists outside of time, he's not constrained of time, we've already adopted that idea anyway. So this isn't a big leap for us to now tap into these ideas like Joe McMoneagle at SRI, or Russell Targ, who's in timeless awareness, or these concepts in pop culture like Interstellar, of saying, well, you know, the aliens are calling us, and they're reaching their hand out almost in this Michelangelo's fresco of God and, you know, human here, you know, and say, which created which, you know, which created which came first. And that's where I believe is the frontier, or the front line of where we are. If I look at someone like Bigelow, who's on Joe Rogan's podcast, and whom I did the transcripts for, as it turned out, I did all his transcripts. And Bigelow is kind of subscribing to this and saying, listen, I want to now do this consciousness studies of the survivability after death, but it's got to stand up in a court. Don't just come to me and say you believe in the Bible or the Quran or the canon of the 12 baskets or some spiritual book or some religious book. I need something that has some sort of scientific weight, not scientism, but some sort of scientific weight, that we can argue it in our best human system, because we're still human. If you're going around talking religion, you've got to convince me, excuse me, not with blind faith, but with some kind of evidence, something that's tangible. And as it turned out, Dr. Jeffrey Mishlove, whom I was talking with Sheila about earlier, he won $500,000 for his essays on consciousness studies. And Bigelow says, yeah, I am so glad you did this. This is exactly what we needed, that we were missing. We've gathered tremendous amount of information in the past 140 years since, modern psychology, William James, and that's progressed. And you look at theosophy with Blavatsky and how they were pulling from Eastern and different religious ideas and spiritual disciplines, and you see the progress to Georgy von Uspensky in, like, I don't know, mid 1940s or the 1950s in Paris, Fontainebleau, and producing the fourth way. And you see all of how this was affecting Jung, and it was affecting Freud, and that now enters into our academia, because that's how you're training psychologists for the future, for the next 20 years or whatever from that time, which brings us to 1970. And then you've got somebody like Mishlove, who's looking at parapsychology from 1970 at Berkeley, and he's awarded a doctorate of parapsychology, the only one on the planet. And this has affected where we are now in current psychology, and is developing what enters into academia for the psychologists that are going to come out in the next 20 years. This is where we are, Colin. This is where we are. And I haven't seen anything yet that surpasses that. I believe that is the limit of where we are, and they're not conclusive. There is no way of being conclusive. I don't think you can be. It's not possible to be
exactly. And Rocket here is saying possible, but AI can only use known informations for its output right now. These are the borders. Correct. Now, what you want to look for is if you look at AI right now, okay. AI is getting to a point now where basically, because if you look at it really, what's the difference between that and us? We basically only operate within known borders as well, within knowledge that already exists for the most part.
Yeah.
What you need to look out for with AI is spontaneity. Because right now,
Sure.
AI can already, they're using AI to write songs, to write stories, to do, it comes up with it by itself. Okay, of course, that's taking from knowledge that is already there. Of course, it's like it's a Google search engine on crack, basically. Yeah, that's what it comes down to. What you need to worry about is when AI does something that's spontaneous, that we didn't program it for, like coming up with an idea, like answering a question or all of a sudden, not just a prompt, hi, or whatever your, Siri, how are you doing today? Oh, I'm going to, you need to worry about it when Siri all of a sudden asks you, hey, how are you doing today? Without you, being spontaneous is what sets us apart from these systems that are pre-programmed, being able to do things that we don't plan on. But that's what we're talking about is, I think, looking at AI or a higher level of consciousness that's artificial could actually end up being the quote unquote alien, the ET, something that we created, right? Like you're talking about something that we create, but it evolves to another level. Does that actually become a new level of life? Who knows? But interesting.
Here's the weird aspect is it's manifesting in, and this is a controversy, but I have seen it. I've seen this model working, and whether you say, Matt, you've been sucked into this or you sucker for this, but I see it actually handling. McCarthy just now has set up a website on remote viewing that's handled by computer. So it turns out that with these language models, it's actually very good at remote viewing. You can give it a target. It's doing this. Courtney Brown set out because what happens with ChatGPT, it's got a problem with memory. You notice that the thread degrades the longer your thread is. Well, he works out a system. He got the AI to work out a system to preserve memory. Right? That's how he got past it. He's opened up this huge remote. And when it comes to target, it's manifesting something we thought that only humans can do. So they're saying, oh, well, hang on a second. I thought that that's a spiritual or mystical aspect that we have, or an eighth-dimensional aspect, if you want to put it into mathematical terms, that could only be manifested from us, that works on this quantum level with quantum entanglement and imagination. And if I say to you, think of this spot here made of energy, well, you're thinking of it. It's being powered by your mental energy, and it's traveled across the world just by me talking about it. We're still live. Okay, I think I'm still live, eh? Let me just make sure. Okay.
Okay, I'm back. Sorry.
Is it work? Okay, sorry about that. I don't know what was cut and what wasn't.
Internet connection. It's on my end here. So.
Okay. All right. So we're able to transfer all this. So now take a look at David Sinclair's research. The thing about cloning now is you've got an ethical problem in many countries. So a lot of things like CRISPR, stem cell research, cloning, USA, it's a no-go area in the public sphere. But what about countries where those laws are more fluid? What's going on? What about a place like Antarctica, or what about Greenland? What about places with different laws that are in effect? Is there a way to connect computers that are silicon-based with biological things? Well, already now during the world big disease that we had, there were medicines that were produced that were based upon, tinkering with DNA and RNA and these sort of things. David Sinclair's making eyeballs in his laboratory. If he invites you round, testing. Are we still on? Bear with us. I don't know if you still hear us there. Is there anybody in the chat that can still hear us? Sheila, do you still hear us? So, Colin, Sheila says personally she thinks that cloning is already an operation. So,
Correct.
I also
yes.
this. I've got a few bits of information that are coming in, and where I say there's smoke, there's fire. So I think that you've got persons that are not necessarily concerned too much about the ethics. They've been able to surpass those kind of things, and they've just been able to say, well, let's go ahead with this thing, irrespective. So that's going on. So you've got this convergence. If you take a look at Neuralink, what's being done, if you've got a person who's separated their left and their right hemisphere, could Neuralink be plugged into either side to bring those together like it was extreme trauma, which it is, which is how you would reintegrate somebody who in an extreme trauma situation has got all these alters, and you try and reintegrate the personalities. Well, isn't that what Neuralink is doing? Isn't that what they're aspiring to do? So if you've now producing these organoids, which they've got computers running organoids, playing Pong and playing computer games, and you talk about the spontaneity of a biological system, well, that's happening right now. You can actually obtain an organoid that lives for about 6 months or 3 months or 6 months or however long it is. And you can buy that now. That's not top secret. You can actually purchase an organoid that's working on that kind of level. So it's already telling you if that's coming into the public sphere, what's existing, in black ops and behind the scenes and, in the technology that's 40 years ahead of us. Well, the sky's the limit and the imagination's the limit. Now you combine that with AI and you go, geesh, Matt, I've got the sickening feeling that I think it's already happened and we're just being handled.
Exactly.
Yeah, I actually think that AI, based on what I knew about AI 25 years ago with Deep Blue, I think it's far ahead. I think it's far
Yeah.
ahead.
And you mentioned, interestingly, before you mentioned the Michael Crichton novel Andromeda, the Andromeda Strain, right? And there was another one speaking about exactly what you're talking about right now with Neuralink and all of that. If you remember the other novel by Michael Crichton, which was The Terminal Man, and in that novel, they took this patient who had uh, epilepsy and wired his brain up so that he would get electrical shocks whenever it would detect him having an epileptic seizure, an episode. Of course, it turns him into a psychopathic killer. A bit of but of course, who knows, but it's interesting how that was predicted so many years ago, back in the 70s. I think that novel came out, and also Westworld, another one by Michael Crichton, the robots becoming essentially self-conscious and no longer wanting to be the entertainment of human beings. Which of course then inspired, the Terminator and things like that. So, but when you look at those things and you say, oh, those have become cultural cliches, a lot of those science fiction stories, but are they really though? We look at what's happening now with AI and with all these things, cloning, and it's kind of scary what's going on.
Mm.
But so yeah, exactly right. So not all of those are classified. Yeah, so like you said, if a lot of those things that are happening, that's public knowledge. What's happening behind the scenes?
So coming back to Chaim Ashed, this is what the agreement is with the so-called extraterrestrials, if you go according to what those persons are chattering about, whether it's right or wrong. I'm not endorsing one thing or another, and I'm not being definitive. But the idea is something akin towards interview with an extraterrestrial. It's almost like humans have this incredible latent abilities. You can see it with remote viewing, or let's say PK phenomena, persons that are able to do things with their mind. I said to you, here's this point in space, Colin, take it, and you're imagining it, and your food is providing energy to give that thing real substance, actually. You can imagine it. It exists your side of the world. It's just traveled your side of the world because we've communicated it. What else can we communicate? Well, we can have two of those spots. We can rotate them, make a sphere, make platonic solids now in our mind. We're now building atoms, just with our minds here. That's very much Kabbalah teachings and things of that nature. So where am I going with this? Humans have been suppressed through religious systems, through political systems, because we are dangerous. And they're going, this is like The Village. If you think of that film, The Village, where you've got the elders who have these scary monsters and they dress up and they say, don't leave the village, stay here. They were trying to produce a village for the children to say, we don't want you to ever experience war. And we will produce these monsters as the necessary evil in order to keep you contained here so that you can have a better life. And so we justify this evil in this way, but it's a lesser evil than what's outside there. But it stunted the village. It stunted it. Okay. And then they had a crisis, and that's the fall. So what is thought about in UFO circles, or if you want to say UFO cult, or that kind of thing, and not all of it's a negative cult, by the way. And you've got differing ideas, so it's not a one size fits all. But the idea is humans need to be suppressed in our Garden of Eden here, so that we don't cut the planet in half with nuclear warfare or nuclear explosions, which is why apparently these UFOs manifest over nukes, and we get government officials saying, the extraterrestrials, or if it's a manifestation of us, are tampering with these missiles and turning them off. And we're going, what? We don't have control of this? And Chaim Mashed is saying, yeah, that's the agreement. If it's our higher self, or it is actually an extraterrestrial, we're having to deal with the fact that there's more going on than we actually realize, whether it's us, as Joe McMoneagle sort of alludes to, saying, yeah, it's like an interstellar thing. It's the circle that's going on, or this theosophical idea of, forgetfulness. And they're saying that's why we only live to a certain amount of years, because that's built into our genetic structure. This is a deliberate thing. Just view ourselves as a container of consciousness, or a focus point of consciousness, and just be at peace with this thing, that it's cyclic. Because if we actually did last longer, we'd have an Atlantis disaster, or we'd have a disaster like between Mars and Jupiter, the Seola story, or this angels and women story. So why would we want to actually do that? We can see with AI, it's already getting dangerous. Have we crossed this threshold? Do we need to have the great reset where we just forget everything, burn down the library of Alexandria, and go back to some kind of rural living? Because that'll give us a chance and eliminate the population from 8-9 billion, which can't deal with our present resources, and bring it down to these Georgia Guidestones idea of so many million, to say, well, that's a happy equilibrium. That's not actually as evil as we thought it was. It might actually be the only way that we can be sustainable on this planet, and maybe that's the difficult thing that we have to face. Colin, that's the best I can present you with.
No, and I really appreciate it, and this has been a fascinating discussion. And there's so many things to really meditate on and think about and research more into, which is why I wanted to do this, to get more ideas and things that I hadn't considered. And this gives me all kinds of avenues now to look into and really, discover some new areas that to me are totally new. So thank you. And with that, I'm gonna have to bring to a close this discussion. We've been here, man, I can't even believe we've been here 2 hours already. It's just been seems like a few minutes, like we just started, literally, which means we'll have to do this more. We have to do this again, because it just, wow. Now I have this recorded now, so I can go back and I need to take some notes and look into more of these things that we've talked about, because this is going to expand my horizons on ideas and all these things we've been talking about now. And I thank you for that, Matthew, because that's the whole point of this. We had no expectations coming into this, and it just takes on a life of its own, right?
Colin,
I know, exactly.
Very kind. I really have enjoyed your kindness, and I've enjoyed your welcome, and I've enjoyed how you've eased the cogs just to get some kind of talking going. And I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed this. So thank you very much for that gift, and also the audience that joined us as well. So thank you very, very much.
Yes, thank you all the people that have interacted with us here. Rocket, King, Sheila, whom else am I forgetting here? If I'm forgetting somebody, forgive me. And we'll do this more in the future. And I am very glad that it's been enjoyable for you as well. That's the whole idea of this. Something enjoyable, something with, no expectations coming into this, no prejudice, no nothing, right? Just letting our thoughts take us and having a discussion, and with the only expectation at the beginning that we don't know everything, and we're just using our ideas and letting it take on a life of its own, which is very interesting. So thank you everybody for being here, and I'm going to end it, and Matthew and I will be in the after party here, but thank you everybody. Thank you for being a part of this, and stay tuned for more.